Welcome to Training Industry Quarterly Electronic Magazine Summer 2012 edition podcast of the article How Simulations Develop Leaders by Bjorn Billhardt. Leadership development programs account for over $15 billion of the $67 billion spent on corporate training in the U.S. in 2011, and investments in leadership programs are on the rise, growing by 9.5%. According to Burson & Associates Corporate Learning Factbook 2012. But unlike functional or technical training, leadership development is not a straightforward task. The success or failure of leadership development initiatives often cannot be measured with precise data. This is because leadership development is not just about the acquisition of knowledge. It is about recognizing patterns, blind spots, and behavior change, and understanding one's own limitations. These characteristics make the building of leadership development programs a unique challenge, yet one that is often attempted with a traditional training approach. Lecture classes are assigned, e-learning courses are developed, and multiple-choice questions are administered. This approach often leads to disengaged learners and a general sense that HR is not providing a strategic advantage to the organization. Effective training experts realize that the tools for building great leaders are distinct from other training tools, and that success needs to be measured differently. Tailored stretch assignments, rotational assignments, and many opportunities for peer networking may not yield measurable increases in knowledge, nor do they fit neatly into an LMS, but they are essential to building a deep leadership bench. How do you build great leaders? One of the most effective yet most misunderstood tools in leadership development is the immersive simulation. The use of simulations and games in leadership training has been a topic of discussion for decades. Most experts agree that simulations are powerful tools for creating meaningful learning opportunities. However, just as leadership development is different from functional training, effective leadership simulations need to be different from technical simulations. Understanding how leadership simulations work and how they can impact the trajectory of emerging leaders is essential to harnessing their potential. At the core of the challenge is the fact that leadership simulations, unlike most other training tools, are not well suited to conveying factual knowledge to learners. Group discussions, lectures, reading, and other modalities are far more efficient at providing learners with information and facts. Yet, if the goal of a leadership development initiative is to create opportunities for emerging leaders to practice behaviors and develop the critical thinking and communication skills needed to succeed at the next level, simulations become far more compelling and useful tools. Misconceptions trainers have about leadership simulations. To understand how to best use simulations in leadership development, a few misconceptions need to be addressed. First, many training professionals believe that leadership simulations, like their more technical counterparts, must mirror reality. They attempt to create or use simulations that closely resemble the processes they are illustrating. More often than not, this approach leads to complex simulation design, confused learners, and inconsistent results. Instead of focusing on learning objectives, learners get distracted by the inconsistencies between the simulation and their real job. If simulations could emulate jobs and companies precisely, they wouldn't be used to train, but rather to run companies. Another misconception about simulations is that they can be used to convey the importance of specific policies or procedures, such as how to follow a corporate code of conduct or how to behave ethically in a certain situation. Misused in this simplistic way, a simulation can quickly become tedious and pedantic, instead of allowing participants to practice behavior holistically in a less predictable and comfortable but far more meaningful way. For example, a simulation that presents a major ethical dilemma as a clear choice to be made in one turn is far less powerful than one that hides a smaller ethical dilemma as part of a larger strategic choice that plays out over multiple turns of gameplay. When confronted with specific ethical choices, learners tend to do the right thing. Yet when they are offered less obvious choices in a competitive situation in which they have to act under pressure, they often make less appropriate choices. This provides far more opportunity for self-reflection and behavior change than a more straightforward discussion, case study, or simulation choice. A final misconception is that leadership simulations can work as standalone training tools. Instead, leadership simulations are at their most powerful when they are integrated into a thoughtfully planned leadership program and woven into the fabric of a well-defined talent strategy. Making simulations work. To harness the power of simulations for leadership development, consider these 4 areas when building a leadership program. Create meaningful challenges. Learners gain insights from leadership simulations quite effectively, but too often the simulation experience is watered down by rules that make the choices too obvious and the game too easy to master. Instead of letting teams compete against the computer, consider letting teams compete against each other, not just by keeping track of a score, but by creating a competitive marketplace where one team's gain is another team's loss. Model long-term implications of decisions. Well-designed leadership simulations create a space in which learners can practice behaviors and see the effects of their actions play out over the long term. For instance, by going through the process of discussing and implementing a business strategy with their team and then watching it disintegrate over multiple rounds of gameplay, learners are forced to practice dealing with failure while continuing to run a business on a day-to-day basis. Teams must then determine whether to stick to a strategy or change course in order to maintain a sustainable business. Include frequent feedback cycles. Effective leadership simulations allow participants to engage in difficult challenges, work as a team, and learn by reflecting on their experience through frequent feedback and facilitator-led discussions. This simulation feedback debrief structure allows participants to internalize key learning objectives and relate what they have learned to their own lives. Most of the learning in a simulation happens during reflection and debriefing periods. Create additional learning moments. Well-designed simulation experiences go beyond executive debriefs. They allow participants to learn from each other beyond the official classroom or webinar time and incorporate peer feedback cohorts that often forge strong bonds during planned and impromptu social opportunities. Being part of a team-based competition, even an online one, allows participants to make deep and meaningful connections with each other that are hard to create in other ways. This builds trust and forges strong networks that often well outlast the training event. Simulations are, of course, only one of many tools that lead to successful leadership development outcomes. While not ideally suited to the transfer of factual knowledge, simulations are one of the best tools to provide participants with leadership practice and offer behavioral insights that go well beyond those that can be achieved in a lecture format. Behavior patterns, once uncovered in a process of self-discovery, are changeable. This leads to true growth within managers and leaders. The outcomes are hard, if not impossible, to measure statistically, but companies that consistently incorporate leadership simulations into their learning and corporate DNA typically create a preponderance of evidence of the success of experimental learning in the long term. Bjorn is the founder and CEO of Enspire Learning. Enspire is a premier provider of transformative, technology-enabled learning experiences, including 3 leadership simulations. Key takeaways. Simulations are exciting and valuable tools for developing leaders. However, leadership simulations are only helpful when used correctly. This article examines the unique outcomes of well-designed simulations, as well as common misconceptions that can lead to poorly designed simulation experiences. Misconceptions about leadership simulations. Leadership simulations must model reality precisely. Leadership simulations can teach complex processes or subtle ethical dilemmas in single rounds of gameplay. Leadership simulations work as standalone training events. Successful leadership simulations create meaningful challenges for participants. Model long-term implications of decisions. Include frequent feedback cycles. Provide opportunities for extended learning. Case study: Leadership Development at Conagra Foods. Conagra Foods, a Fortune 500 packaged foods company, recognized that improving performance at the director level was a critical component to achieving its revenue and profit goals. Leadership development and business acumen training would significantly enhance the company's performance. Conagra Foods created a 6-day business immersion program called Leadership in Action and developed a multi-year strategy to roll out the program to all director-level employees. Conagra Foods selected the Business Challenge Leadership and Business Acumen simulation to serve as a capstone of this new program. The turn-based computer simulation brought the key lessons from the various prior program modules together and taught directors to understand the relationship between company strategy, operational decisions, and financial measures. The simulation also allowed participants to increase financial literacy and understanding of financial statements, develop foundational expertise in investment and ROI analysis, and relate strategy to execution at the operational and tactical level. Participants in Business Challenge were paired into teams that competed against each other in a dynamic online marketplace resembling but not mimicking Conagra Foods' business. Participants modeled decisions on their internet-connected laptops and discovered the long-term impacts of their decisions through 10 quarters of gameplay over the course of one day. Teams balanced sales growth with cash flow, managed operational metrics, and analyzed financial statements to make the best investment decisions. Custom-developed debriefs were targeted to Conagra Foods' specific business model and issues. Exercises, group discussions, and final presentations brought learning to life and allowed participants to relate the learning objectives to their own jobs. A celebratory dinner recognized the group's achievements, and participants were asked to integrate the lessons learned into their day-to-day jobs. Conagra Foods conducted an independent ROI study on the Leadership in Action program and discovered a significant positive impact on the company's operations. The program had an influence on reducing turnover of high-performing leaders. Only 3% of high-performing leaders who had participated in the program left Conagra Foods, compared to the nearly 9% of their untrained counterparts over the same 12-month period. It is a noteworthy difference, given the replacement cost of nearly $150,000 per leader. The qualitative data also reflected success for the simulation. Conagra conducted a survey following a Business Challenge experience. When participants were asked to name the most important thing they learned from the simulation, answers included, "It was a good way to really experience how business decisions impact a company's financial statement. For me, being in a role with little insight in the finance side, it illustrated the effect of real business decisions." Fiscal responsibility is required at all levels of the company. Simple decisions can sometimes be very costly. Success is never based on a single metric. You need to balance and watch all levers. You have to understand the trade-offs and make decisions based on calculated risks. You will never have all the parameters needed to guide you. Take the emotion out of decisions. Work on being more prepared in a financially driven world. You've been listening to How Simulations Develop Leaders by Bjorn Billhardt. For more podcasts and articles like this, visit www.trainingindustry.com. Thanks for listening. I'm Roel Gorman.